It's kind of crazy when you think about it. In just 6 short years, American military aviation went from fabric-winged biplanes all the way to the dawn of the jet age. I mean, what a staggering transformation. It forged an arsenal in the sky, and today, we're going to look at the legendary aircraft that made it all happen.
This single sentence, it just perfectly captures the massive impact of these machines. They weren't just tools of war, not at all. They were history-making instruments that literally secured victory, from the huge naval battles of the Pacific to the heavily defended skies over Europe.
So, where do we start? Well, to win a war, first, you have to win the sky. So we're beginning with the fighters, the planes designed for one simple mission: air supremacy. We're going to trace their evolution from the toughest-nails defenders of the early war to the long-range legends that, in the end, broke the back of the Luftwaffe. First up, the P-40 Warhawk. Yeah, the one made famous by the shark's mouth of the Flying Tigers. Now, it wasn't the fastest or the most nimble plane out there, but the P-40's real strength was its sheer toughness. It was a heavily armored survivor that could outdive almost any opponent, and that made it an absolutely critical asset in the brutal opening days of the war.
Now for something totally different. The P-38 Lightning. Its super unique twin-boom design earned it the German nickname the Fork-tailed Devil, and it gave the P-38 two huge advantages: incredible range and a nose just packed with devastating, concentrated firepower. It was that combination that let a squadron of P-38s fly hundreds of miles over open ocean to intercept the transport of Admiral Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor. Just a massive blow to Japanese morale.
But when you want to talk about pure brute force toughness, the P-47 Thunderbolt, or the Jug as they called it, is in a class of its own. This 7-ton beast could soak up an unbelievable amount of damage and still bring its pilot home. And what's really amazing, it could carry a bomb load similar to a light bomber, making it one of the most feared ground attack aircraft over Europe. All right, our next fighter is the one many people consider the greatest of the war, the P-51 Mustang. At first, it was a pretty decent plane, but one single change turned it into an absolute legend. And that change was the British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. Its revolutionary supercharger let the Mustang keep its peak performance way up at high altitude, right where the bombers were flying. This turned it into the Cadillac of the skies, the ultimate long-range escort that could fly all the way to Berlin and back, finally giving our bombers the protection they so desperately need. So, while all that was happening in Europe, over in the Pacific, the U.S. Navy was facing a really fearsome opponent, the agile Japanese Zero. Their answer was the F-6F Hellcat. This fighter was designed from the ground up with one goal in mind: hunt and destroy the Zero. It was faster, tougher, better armed, and it could outclimb its rival. The results were so lopsided it was nicknamed the Ace Maker. Get this, it accounted for nearly 75% of all U.S. Navy aerial victories in the war. And right alongside the Hellcat, another icon was patrolling the Pacific skies, the F-4U Corsair. You can spot it instantly by that inverted gull wing, which, by the way, was a clever engineering fix to fit a massive propeller. The Japanese knew it as Whistling Death because of the terrifying sound it made in a dive. The Marines used it mostly from island bases, and it was just a devastatingly effective fighter and ground attack weapon. So, once you've established control of the air, it's time to bring in the heavy hitters. We're turning now to the bombers, the strategic hammer that systematically took apart the enemy's ability to even wage war. Let's start with the SBD Dauntless. On paper, it was slow, maybe even a little vulnerable. And as a dive bomber, its mission was just incredibly dangerous. Fly straight into a storm of anti-aircraft fire to drop one single bomb, and yet, this unassuming aircraft would soon prove to be one of the most decisive weapons of the entire war. That moment came at the Battle of Midway. In just a few critical hours, squadrons of SBD Dauntlesses dove on the Japanese fleet and sank 4 of its most powerful aircraft carriers. 4. This single action permanently changed the balance of power in the Pacific. And it was a feat accomplished not by some superweapon, but by this rugged, reliable dive bomber. Now, while the Dauntless was a specialist, the B-25 Mitchell was a master of versatility. It's forever famous for that incredible Doolittle raid, launching from an aircraft carrier to strike Tokyo and prove that the Japanese homeland was not invincible. But its talents didn't stop there. Over in the Pacific, it was turned into a fearsome anti-shipping platform, sometimes armed with a massive 75mm cannon in its nose. Yeah, you heard that right. For the air war over Europe, one plane became the symbol of American resolve, the B-17 Flying Fortress.
and it earned that name. The stories from crews are just incredible. B-17s coming back to base shot full of holes, engines knocked out, but somehow still flying. This legendary toughness made it the icon of the dangerous daylight bombing campaign against Germany.
But you know, while the B-17 captured everyone's imagination, the B-24 Liberator was the campaign's unsung workhorse. In fact, more Liberators were produced than any other American military aircraft in history. Its very distinct, long wing wasn't quite as durable as the B-17's, but it gave the B-24 superior range and payload, which made it absolutely indispensable in every single theater of the war.
So the choice between these two heavy bombers really presented a critical strategic trade-off. You had the B-17 Flying Fortress, which offered that legendary toughness, a plane that could take a beating and bring its crew home. On the other hand, you had the B-24 Liberator, which sacrificed some of that durability for greater range and a heavier bomb load. And that was essential for long-range missions, especially across the vast distances of the Pacific.
Now, the culmination of all of America's wartime bomber development was the B-29 Superfortress. And this thing was a genuine technological marvel. This was the future. It had a pressurized crew cabin for high-altitude flight above the enemy's defenses and remote-controlled, computer-assisted gun turrets. I mean, it was this advanced platform that was chosen for the war's most consequential mission, delivering the atomic bombs that would bring World War II to its end.
But victory wasn't just won by the glamour planes. Nope. Behind the fighters and bombers was a whole fleet of unsung heroes, aircraft that performed the vital, often overlooked missions of transport, patrol, and rescue. These planes were the backbone of the entire Allied effort. A perfect example is the PBY Catalina. Slow and, let's be honest, kinda awkward looking, this flying boat had incredible endurance. That made it the perfect long-range eyes and ears of the fleet. It was actually a Catalina that gave the crucial first warning that the Japanese fleet was approaching Midway. And in the Pacific, they flew as nocturnal black cats, hunting enemy shipping by the light of the moon.
But perhaps the most critical support plane of them all was the humble C-47 Skytrain, the military version of the revolutionary DC-3 airliner. Known affectionately as the Goonie Bird, this plane did everything. It dropped paratroopers behind enemy lines on D-Day, it airlifted supplies over the treacherous Himalayan hump to China, and it evacuated countless wounded soldiers from the front line.
Just how important was it? Well, to put its contribution into perspective, General Dwight D. Eisenhower himself, the Supreme Allied Commander, named the C-47 as one of the 4 key tools that won the war. That's the level of impact this simple, reliable transport had on the final victory. It's just amazing. Okay, for our final aircraft, we're going to look to the future that was already starting to dawn as the war came to a close. Even as propellers dominated the skies, engineers were perfecting a totally radical new form of propulsion, the jet engine.
And this is it, the P-80 Shooting Star, America's first operational jet fighter. It was a glimpse of a brand new reality, sleek, powerful, and with a speed that propeller planes just couldn't touch. A handful of them arrived in Italy right as the war in Europe was ending, but their presence signaled a fundamental shift. The era of the piston engine fighter, which had been perfected over the last 6 years, was officially over. The sound of the Shooting Star was the sound of the future of air combat.
I mean, think about that leap. In less than a decade, America went from fabric biplanes to combat-ready jets. The pace of wartime innovation was just breathtaking. It was like 50 years of progress compressed into 6. And this incredible acceleration, it just begs a final, pretty sobering question. After a leap that massive, what on earth would the skies of the next war look like?